Woodstock Music and Arts Festival was the gathering of America's youth to enjoy 3 days of peace, love, and music. What the concert-goers didn't realize was the impact this musical event would have on society. Woodstock impacted our society culturally, politically, economically, and socially. Woodstock was the most influential musical event of the 20th century, and we are still feeling its effects today.
Said I'm going down to Leicester's farm, gonna join in a rock and roll band. Got to get back to the land, set my soul free. We are stars, we are golden.
Woodstock was a 3-day music and arts festival held at Max Yasker's 600-acre farm in the Catskill Mountains in Bethel, New York. The festival took place from August 15th through 18th in 1969. Woodstock was considered to be one of the greatest rock and roll moments of all time. Woodstock was the high point of the counterculture movement of the 1960s. Many anti-protest songs were sung at Woodstock. Individuals and groups of all descriptions came to Woodstock from all over the United States. The festival organizers were John Roberts, Michael Lang, and Joe Roseman. Everyone was called together for a 3-day festival of peace, love, and joy. About 100,000 people were expected to show up for this experience, but an overwhelming 500,000 people showed up and shocked the promoters. I interviewed Mr. Jim Shelley, who is a speaker and guide at the Woodstock Museum in Bethel, New York. Mr. Shelley also attended Woodstock in 1969. Many of the photos I used in this presentation came from Mr. Shelley's Kodachrome camera. Some were even published in Time magazine.
Well, there's lots of answers to that question, because at the time, I really liked it. I had a great time. I went back home. I told some of my friends who hadn't gone what a good time I had. But that was that. But now, when I work at the museum and I meet people like you or your parents and things, and I talk to them more and more about it, and I get a chance to talk to young people like you about it, I realize that it was a much bigger thing than even I thought. That it was something that a lot of people who weren't there, it meant a lot to them.
But above that, the important thing that you've proven to the world is that 500,000 kids, and I call you kids because I have children older than you are, 500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music, and have nothing but fun and music, and I God bless you for it.
From Germany recently, and you might say, why would anybody from Germany want to go and visit the place where Woodstock was? And I'm surprised too sometimes, and I'm surprised how many people from all over the world come there, not just from New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and stuff like that. They come from all over the world to visit this place. And these two people that I met from Germany, when they were younger, they were living in what was called East Germany. Your dad can explain what that means to you, okay? But what it kind of means is that they were living in a country where there was no freedom. They couldn't do things like you and I do things. Like we just assume we can go out and do things all the time whenever we want. They could not. They were not allowed to listen to music. And what they told me is that when they heard about Woodstock, because they eventually heard about it, to them it represented this huge thing of freedom. And I never thought of that, but to them, that's what it meant.
During the 60s, many problems were occurring around the world, such as the Vietnam War. Many songs sung at Woodstock were anti-war songs, but Woodstock was not a political demonstration. The problem was that many people in America and in New York did not want 100,000 teens in one area at once. They thought the teens would be violent and destroy the town of Bethel, but that was the exact opposite of what happened. The teens were there to have a good time, not for violence and protesting.
This was not a political demonstration. And in the 1960s, and even today, of course, there are a lot of political demonstrations. People want to voice their opinion, right?
Yeah.
That's not what Woodstock was. Woodstock was supposed to be a weekend where people listened to music and they looked at art and stuff like that. But because society saw 500,000 young people in 1969 together for a whole weekend and not fighting and not doing anything to each other, just having a good time, it sort of said, you know what, maybe they're right. You know, maybe some of their other ideas aren't so crazy after all, you know, like being anti-war in 1969. That was a pretty divisive thing.
Since many people were afraid that Woodstock would lead to violence, they portrayed Woodstock as a bad thing. They thought that it was violent, and they thought about the drugs and much more. They pulled out the negative of Woodstock. Only one person died out of 500,000 due to drug overdose. Mr. Shelley said that there were no problems during Woodstock when he attended, but society saw many problems. This shows that the kids were there for the peace and music. This is what CBS had to say about Woodstock.
A rock music festival that drew hundreds of thousands of young people to a dairy farm in White Lake, New York over the weekend came to an end today. And we have a report from Richard O'Brien.
They listened for 3 days, and today they sounded the retreat and headed for home. The sponsors said it was going to be 3 days of peace and music. It was that all right, and much more. Estimates of the crowd ranged up to more than 300,000, and it was that size that caused most of the trouble. That and the rainstorms that turned the big dairy meadow into a mud farm.
To answer my focus question, which was what was the impact of Woodstock on the people of the 60s, I realized that Woodstock was not meant for protesting, which I thought that's what it was going into this project, but I realized that it was about freedom and peace. Woodstock changed people around the world, even in Germany, like what Mr. Shelley said. It gave people freedom, and it changed what society thought about America's youth. It shocked America and changed the world. We are still feeling its effects today. Since my project was about Woodstock, I decided to add a little parts of songs that were sung during the music festival.
Well, they cannot wrong decided. I have come to lose the smile. He just grinned and shook my hand. No was all he said.